Thank you so much, Reverend Jennings, for that very interesting historical survey of Jamaican music and a little bit more than that too. We're going to get into a discussion with our panel, and I'm positive that they will reflect on what some of what Reverend Jennings spoke about, but I want them to reflect on a specific question, which he touched on towards the end of his presentation, but in a very skillful way of not giving away too much of his feelings. The question is there a problem with the message contained in our music? Why is this so, and what should we do about it? And we have some panelists, 3 persons to discuss this matter with us. We have JoAnn Richards-Goffe. She's a Christian cultural advocate, an author, speaker, singer, songwriter, and a big word, an ethnodoxologist. JoAnn, we have to tell us what that means a little bit from now. Then we have Leighanne Small, a Jamaican-American gospel singer, speaker, and teacher with music on all major platforms. I first heard Leighanne one day. I was driving and I heard her on Cool FM, a song, and I had to stop the car and listen to the song because I couldn't believe that I was hearing such a hardcore Christian dancehall song on radio, and it was so good. So we hear from her. And then we have YeKengale, Jamaican psalmist, educator, author, and producer, the CEO of Lightning Flash Productions. We should have also had Abijah. Perhaps the best known of our panelists would have been Abijah. He's a popular reggae artist, a singj, a songwriter, and an ambassador for peace. However, Abijah is traveling and he should have joined us by Zoom, but the weather is creating a lot of challenges, and so he's not able to have a secure, a stable connection to be with us. So he sends his apologies. So we've heard Reverend Jennings with his overview, and I have asked a specific question to our panelists. You might want to reflect a little bit on what Reverend Jennings said, but is there a problem with the message contained in our music? Why is it so, and what should we do about it? So who's going to start off for us?
Okay, let me dive in first. I see Leighanne nodding her head. First of all, David said I would need to let you know what is an ethnodoxologist. So let me just get that out of the way before I move on. An ethnodoxologist is someone who facilitates and promotes the use of indigenous languages and artistic expressions in worship. So the question, is there something wrong with our songs, with our music? Now, I am here from the perspective of being a Christian cultural advocate. And so I, in my mind, was thinking more about the Christian songs. And I was thinking about, to what extent are we addressing the issues of the nation as Jamaican Christian songwriters and singers? And I also tend to focus a lot on language. And so my question would be, in a bilingual nation such as ours, where we have the Jamaican Standard English and the Jamaican Creole, which we popularly call patois, how many of these songs, because we're talking about communicating, message has to do with communication. And if we're talking about a message in the music, how many of our songs are utilizing the 2 languages? Or how many are utilized? We know that the majority, vast majority, utilize the Jamaican Standard English or just plain English, as we know to call it. And how many really are using the Jamaican Creole? And to what extent, therefore, are we really getting to the heart of people by sticking with majority, one language? And it is the language that is the first language of the minority, I would propose.
So let me jump in and ask you, JoAnn. Sorry about that. You kind of set up yourself for this. You say you were thinking about the content of Christian music if it addresses the concerns of our nation. What do you think about that?
Oh, what do I think about that? And I think, and by the way, no, I really should have first of all said thank you to Reverend Jennings for that very comprehensive presentation. I never expect something like that, honestly. It was way more than I expected. But yeah, what do I think of it? I think that life, that our Christian life is about life. It is not, or ought not to simply be about being in a space and saying words of praise and words of worship, but it is an entire livity, as it were, is what it ought to be. And so if we are not addressing these issues in the issues that affect us, I mean, and the truth is, my mother of blessed memory said to me one day, I was very shocked, it was unexpected, that she thinks that Rastafari way of life is much more biblical than how a lot of Christians present themselves. And really, when you look at the songs coming out of Rastafari, they deal with a range of issues that have to do with life, relationships, even food, and of course, things to do with scripture. They sing a lot of scripture too, and all these things. But we have a tendency to keep our topics or themes very narrow. I remember us doing a conversation once on what songs are available for Christian couples. It's like love songs for Christian couples are few and far between.
Local love songs, that is.
Pardon?
That's local love songs.
Yes, man. I am talking about Jamaican
Okay.
songs. Yeah.
Right.
So
Thanks,
I don't know if what I've said.
Yes. Let's get us started.
Yes.
Getting us started. What I heard you saying is that in your concentration on this topic, you're suggesting that the content of our Christian songs, okay, local Christian songs, is not as diverse as it could have been to reflect your word, liberty. All right, great.
Yes.
Can I jump in on your original question?
Yes, sure.
One of the things I was considering is the content of our music is a reflection of, in many cases, a fractured society or a fractured development, dysfunctional experiences. And so on one side, as the question, is there a problem with the content of our music? Music in many ways and art forms in many ways will reflect people's realities. So that's the first thing. That must be established. And so I feel like it's a symptom of the issue where or government or churches, groups that should be actively advocating for marginalized communities have not been as effective, I guess, as they could have been. But the other side of it, especially as a teacher in the classroom, is the reality that, especially for developing brains, they are going to be affected by what they hear, etc. And so what actually happens is you kind of create a positive feedback mechanism where we have a music in many cases is reflecting the pain without, okay, yes, I'm really boasting about my gun and how I shoot up 10 people and I'm this, but in reality, is highlighting the fact that there are people who are living this reality every day that many of us are very far removed from. It's highlighting pain. It's highlighting just a horrible reality in many ways, meaning the traumatic, to simplify it. But the flip of it also is, unfortunately, whether or not it is intentional, music, especially, they did more of the studies would reflect, I guess, US rap music and its impact on developing, especially the teenage brain, because the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. It actually increases, in many cases, these negative behaviors. So is there a problem? Possibly, but to just label it as a problem and simplify it there and then is to, I guess, ignore the reality of what people are dealing with. And so I think if we heal society, if we actually put things in place that heals our society and shows our people, especially those suffering, they cuss off the government, they look upon the life we live in is a better way we're seeking. Everybody want to cuss everybody about the fact that nobody hears our pain. If we address that, then just the basics of out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What you're experiencing what will flow from our musicians may actually change.
Interesting, Leighanne. I hear you saying that the music is more reflecting the culture than prescribing. More saying that, even though you're admitting that there might be some of the negative kinds of impact. Kenny, your thoughts on the matter?
I don't know if prescriptive and descriptive are the best terms to use. Music is a language of soul, of mood, of emotion, whereas we use verbs for thoughts. Music is a language we use to express feelings. And so therefore the message in the music is always going to be me or whoever the composer, musician, performer is. It's what I'm feeling, it's what I want to convey. And so whether it be sex or violence or positive vibrations or whatever, we are the message in the music, whether the music has lyrics or no. That's the vibe that's being broadcast. And so therefore music can be used therapeutically, meaning if I'm emitting or transmitting a positive vibe, then and lyrics as well, then I guess you could call that prescriptive. It's not prescriptive, it's basically that you're being positive. And people who are basically absorbing the things that are seen around and putting that's, if you want to call that descriptive, fine, but what they really are just doing is expressing themselves. So with regards to, I think I'll be succinct because of time. There is no way that you can correct what is wrong in the music, or I don't even think it's proper to say that there's something wrong with the music if somebody is being true to themselves. The issue is that our music shows us our problems as well as our strengths, and where Jamaican people are violent, that's coming out in music. Are you going to blame musicians for that? It's a reflection of who we are. And so therefore the issue is in our development of ourselves and our environment, and the things that inspire our people and give our people the vibe that we have.
A very interesting perspective, Ken. The truth is that if what you're saying is true, then Jamaican music and any music has always expressed the personal experiences and social realities of our people. The big question we're asking today is, has that changed today in our popular music? We heard from Reverend Jennings's presentation about the music from 60s and 70s and 80s and the messages that they were doing. And in many senses, we have similar messages today. But has the way in which that expression took place, has that changed, and is that negative? Leighanne?
Yeah, I want to address that. people who were experiencing different forms of oppression previously, actually, it was almost, music was a tool in many cases of advocacy. Not necessarily like, not saying that there weren't, I guess, songs that were promoting things that may not have been the most useful to our culture. But in general, I feel like there was a certain inspiration, a driving towards advocacy and change, and a sense of pride, and just the fact that this may be our reality now. We may live in this situation now, but it actually motivated us and unified us to push forward and to do better, as opposed to the reality now in music is a celebration. Yes, we're violent and we kill off each other. Yes, it's a celebration. I have more guns than you and shot more people than you. I'm better. Or I have 10 matey and I trick all of them and make them think they're the only one. In other words, it's a fact that maybe even if it existed before, the prevalence of celebrating the very things that in many ways are harmful and are consistently hurting us as a nation, that has increased, in our theme. That's my observation.
Well, Leighanne, may I say that the best medicine for a bad habit is a good habit. In other words, that if you want to basically break one habit of being, then interrupt it with another one, but having it in a different direction. And so if we were talking about healing the Jamaican soul, using music, we're therefore talking about basically replacing bad music with good music, music with positive vibrations, as Bob would say. It was not so long ago, I remember good friends of mine, Yasu Safari and Tony Rebel, and a whole cadre, Garnet Silk was amongst that trend, that they very consciously, pretty much like what Leighanne is doing now in the Christian space, decided that, listen, the music getting too negative, it's getting too dark. We have to make we have to do a revolution. And they made a conscious, in all of their recordings, I mean, Tony took a vow, as to how he was going to use his music, and all of that led to a trend in popular music that reversed a lot of it didn't replace it, but it certainly basically made an impact. And a lot of people, Queen Ifrica, a whole lot of artists, Etana came into that space and started to basically allow some of us to heal and to express more emotions than just the darkest demons that we have. The issue about, though, and this is what I caution against, once you start talking about, either you're going to demonize or you're going to censor. If you're talking about the approaches that, listen, this is bad music, it can't play, that's censorship. Or bad musician, you shouldn't do that, slap on the wrist, you should play good music, then what you're doing is demonizing. Really and truly, the best replacement for what is bad is what is good. If you have a positive vibe, then come into the space and, like Bob or Tony or whatever, in other words, offer your gift to the public and be as militant and be as persistent as they are. And you start making a difference in the culture.
Thank you. JoAnn, I saw I saw a thought crawling out of your ears and your mouth and everywhere. Come, what are you saying?
No, I was actually reading the chat and responding, and then my finger touched the mute button, so I couldn't hear what was being said.
Yeah.
But so if I comment on what I was responding to in the chat that may take us off.
That's fine, go ahead, because I was going to go to the chat shortly. So tell me what.
Dr. Bain was asking, are our musicians recording, publishing, and airing music mainly to make money, to survive, or to thrive? And that's really an excellent question, because I mean, I've had conversations with even some of our Christian musicians, and I realized that one of the primary concerns seems to be more how marketable will this song be than, okay, this is what I believe God is calling me to sing. So, and I see Leighanne nodding. So I guess I'm not too far off the mark. It really is a good question. And that can, as a matter of fact, I remember speaking with a young lady who had won some competition that they had running on the television. I can't remember which it was. And when I met her, I mean, she was singing some, sexually risque stuff and, really on the edge there. But when I met her and was talking with her, it was a different personality completely. And she told me that when she went to the competition, the song she took was one with, conscious lyrics, as we would say. And them call her one side and say, listen, you have a nice voice and everything, but that song is not going to cut it. The people want to hear X, Y, and Z. And she actually shifted her direction and gave the people what she was told that they wanted in order, I suppose, to make it big, in order to become it's a fame and fortune kind of outlook. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Keith Porter says, to a large extent, I think that the music somewhat reflect our values and attitudes or perspectives. That's what he is saying in the chat there. Now, it's very interesting because I'm kind of hearing some things coming through. I don't think we are really disagreeing. I hear Ken saying that people are going to sing what their experiences are, and maybe it is that some of us need to some of us who can sing, which excludes me, we need to take a deliberate effort to do something different to create a more positive space. But at the same time, we can't be too hard and fast against people for singing their experiences. On the other hand, I'm hearing Leighanne saying that there are some things, especially for young people, that are detrimental to their mental health. The frontal lobe of their brains not fully developed, and the kinds of hardcore lyrics that sometimes will shift them in the wrong direction. Okay, so let me ask a question. Ken spoke about a deliberate effort on the part of some musicians. Are there deliberate efforts apart from that which Ken spoke about that are being taken now by different parts of our musical industry, by our church, whatever? Are there deliberate efforts around to positively impact the lyrics of our popular musical culture? Do you know of anything like that?
All the time. I mean, people, you're talking about a movement. Abijah, who certainly was to be in this space, is known as an advocate of just exactly that. And there are many still today who feel a commitment in their music making to be, to be consistently positive and consistently compelling in terms of messaging. I'm reflecting in my experience as principal of a school 20 years ago, 30 years ago. One of the successes that we had, not one of my children loved the dancehall space. And it was because we had created an alternative space at school. We were one of the first schools to pioneer piping music through from morning till evening. And it was all pop music that we were piping. In fact, that was the greatest expression of the Everton Blenders and the Garnet Six and whatnot and have you. These children that was what was pumping in these children's veins all day. And as a result, what was disturbing for them in a dancehall space was when the music changed to anything that wasn't positive. They developed a strong dislike to it, and to lots of other. And so this is what I mean when I say that, music is our culture, but it also creates our culture, and it can therefore be used creatively. And in all kinds of ways. IRI FM, for example, again, got into this space where we were all foreign-minded in our values and decided to make a commitment. We're playing Jamaican music. This is ridiculous. When you want to impact the culture, you have to be deliberate about it. And you have to, and there's just, that's all there is to it. Because the fact is that the culture is a competitive space. And yeah, that's it.
So guys, here's $1 million question then. If we are talking about impacting the culture through our music, what place is the church playing in this?
Good question.
Leighanne?
Yeah, let me actually jump just 2 seconds even before on the efforts question and policy. I live in New York, and I feel a very intentional approach to controlling culture, narrative, what you can speak about. You are punished in different ways. Your career is risked and all sorts of things in this country if you do not fit their narrative. It is so real that even for some of the music I have released, YouTube made sure to email me and let me know this cannot be monetized. Absolutely not, because this is promoting biblical, blah, 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 and borderline to hate. Now, although I may not like this, what I can see is a country, a space where they're very intentional about what they will tolerate and what they will not. And the debate, I'm not saying this to say I agree or disagree with it. It's just food for thought as it relates to when we talk about demonizing people who to them, to this country, they think are not healthy and fitting for society. The question is raised because on one side, I feel demonized for my religious views. Something to put out there, and how for those who are singing their authentic reality and beliefs in our country, in Jamaica, what are the implications of that? But the flip of it too is how powerful and impactful it is, because there is, like, within where I work, within all these different spaces, it's almost like everyone is unanimous. It's almost, I don't know how to explain it. We are unanimous that we will not accept any violence meant, against these protected groups and these marginalized communities. The question is, therefore, I guess I put a question back, is censorship, when it comes to alignment with your values as a country, always a bad thing? Is it something, when we talk about efforts and policies and putting things in place that will heal our society? Food for thought. I'm being neutral on the matter, but they're definitely intentional on what music. I mean, even if you can have a platform, what the algorithm literally reduces the likelihood of it popping up, and you'll make no money from it. It's literally like, no, you just spent hours in studio on this music. We will not, you hit 10,000 views, you hit 20,000, you're getting $0 for it, because you are not fitting our narrative on what we think a healthy, accommodating, accepting society with diversity, equity, inclusion looks like. What are the implications as we talk about Jamaica and the fact that we already know that there is a strong influence with the violence, with all of these different things. It is influencing our youth, unfortunately. How can we be sensitive to the realities of those who are in pain and those who are dealing with things, and in the same breath, protect our younger generation and teach them what our values are, what the ideal values are? In 1962, my daddy used to talk about when he saw the flag and all these different things, the nation we wanted to build and the nation we can still build. What are the implications?
Wow. Any thoughts?
In answer to the question about censorship, it should always be the tool of last resort and used like capital punishment, very, very, very sparingly.
Well, what Leighanne is saying, it is now the tool of first resort in the big nations, like in the USA. And so here is a problem a local dancehall artist face. He can't sing some things, or let's say a Christian artist can't sing something because you're going to start singing Desmond Dekker song. You can't wake up in the morning no food to breakfast, no bread, people.
David.
And for
Yeah.
those very reasons, David,
Yeah.
the value of free speech and free associate, all of those values, for all of the negative reasons you cited, that's exactly why when societies begin to tend towards autocratic impulses and I know what is best for the nation, no. The fact is that in democracies, you leave that to individual people, individual families, individual communities, basically. And you do have obviously social regulation that's necessary, but you can't take that as an instrument of first resort. It's the last resort that must be used sparingly.
So then,
yeah.
So then, Ken, the questioning, going back to something that JoAnn said earlier about the very narrow kinds of topics that Christian music, embraces. Why can't we, as Christians, or is there a move as Christians to sing about some of the same issues that Leighanne just spoke about? For instance, one of the big things in Jamaican dancehall song is anti-gay lyrics, which sometimes sounds like killing of homosexuals. Is it Christian to speak about the value of protecting all human life, including the gay life? Okay? And is that something, how do we get our people to start to embrace music like that?
Start to embrace. You see, those are the questions.
To create music like that.
Yeah, but this is it. As a musician, believe me, pure music is coming from the heart. It's not that you can't create it from the head. You can go and you can basically devise a means to control society and use music for that. But that's not pure art.
Okay.
And that's not the kind of art that democratic societies celebrate at any rate. What we celebrate is the power of inspiration, the ability to be true to yourself, and by being true to yourself, also basically release others into the same freedom.
Yes, yeah. JoAnn.
No, just that someone had, Loy Walters had written in the chat, we need to start writing music and songs for our churches and minister them there and copyright them and share them across different churches and make them based on our culture and share them across the airwaves. Well, I guess this is what we have been saying in the last few minutes there.
And you especially, JoAnn, for the last 10, 15 years.
Yes.
Most definitely. I must tell you guys that I recently wrote some dancehall lyrics for a praise and worship song. Gave them to my
congratulations, David.
Gave them to my musical director at church for him to put music to. I can't sing or play a note of music. All right.
May I say this, David? I think Henley Morgan is still on. When you get those lyrics together, then give Henley a call and get expresses recorded.
I gave it to my musical director, and he's supposed to come up with a song. But he's a young man, and I've chided him for not loving dancehall enough. Can you imagine that? He laughs. He's excellent. That's just a input. He's an excellent musician, but he says he's more into rock music. Very interesting. One of the persons I wanted to get in this forum was my favorite dancehall DJ, Agent Sasko. And one of the things I've liked about Sasko is his lyrics are generally very clean and very positive, and I wish that we knew many more like him and that we had more artists like him coming out of our churches. Years gone by, we had Kevin and Robin, and we had Horace and Peter, but I have not heard much of many more using the popular genre of Jamaican music to do Christian lyrics.
Kevin Downswell has really done a lot.
But Kevin Downswell is that dancehall really?
No, but
no, that's yeah.
Not necessarily only, yes.
Yeah. I like Kevin Downswell too, and what's his name from Spanish Town?
Prodigal?
I like Prodigal too. Not
Oh,
enough. I don't hear enough of him.
No, I know what you're
Jermaine,
talking.
Jermaine Edwards.
Jermaine Edwards, you're
Right.
talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like them also. Jermaine Edwards' song, which has been made world famous by that youngster, is really a positive song. You know, it's a beautiful day.
I would
Yeah, and
say
how did you come about?
Well, devotional time. You know what I mean by that is a lot of my first song that I released commenting exactly on what I was observing a lot of things like promotion of things that were anti-biblical standards or biblical culture being celebrated, and just wanting to comment on that, to just have a conversation about that. And that's how I started writing music. But I will say this, as you talk about what's coming out of the church, resources are definitely needed. So I'll highlight a few things. Where I'm at right now, I'm in New York, but in the US, a lot of the music that is very famous right now is coming out of churches. So you had a phase where everything is Christian contemporary now. And so it's there was Bethel music. In other words, churches, they really just, their whole sound system in their church is a studio already. In other words, is pristine enough, is top quality, high quality enough that they're actually just, they sit together and have songwriting sessions as a church. It's organized, it's structured. And then the Lord bless you. The idea is that literally, we wrote this song last week together. We knew we needed a song. We knew the theme of the sermon. We wrote the song. The next thing we know, every church in the whole world is singing, the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine. The idea is resources are important. I'll tell you why. I have a book of about 20-something songs ready to be released. I release probably a song a year because to pay the Gitsy, to pay for the studio time, to pay the producer, remember I'm using my 9-to-5 budget, to pay all of these different people. I don't even need to own the music because I'm on a mission. Attached to a church that is releasing, there's a church and they have a label assigned to them. This is something as a country that we can benefit from, because if we now say, okay, or like we have pastors who have this vision, if we're going to impact our culture, not many people, not all people, especially the people who really want to target, are necessarily coming to church, right? And so we appreciate, it's highly documented in academia, the influence on music, on the psyche, on culture, on behavior. Then we need to be intentionally investing in this. That's the first thing. Even if it's the church owns the music and all proceeds from it, we don't care. And there are many of us who are on a mission not to be rich from music anyway. What we want to do is speak to people. We're hearing a lot of narratives, and all we want to do is to be in a space where we're able to release, in many cases, even what God has said to us, that God has given us responses to a lot of arguments in this space. But I'm releasing one song a year because it's costing me $200 and something thousand between all of the different things, that the mixing and mastering alone. And I'm sure, I guess Ken can address, can attest to the cost of mixing and mastering, the cost because the next thing I want to also do is honor Levites, honor musicians. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but especially because our musicians, highly skilled, are sometimes tempted to go into promoting music that is literally anti-biblical because they just can't. It's their bread and butter, and but the church don't want to pay them. That is something they talk about all the time. Because of that, I'm not begging. I'm not like, oh, you can play on my track for me. I'm waiting till I've saved enough. What's your cost? If you say it's $40,000, which by the way is cheap compared to I'm sure what other. All right, I have to wait until I get that. And then when I have everything put together now, call producers, say, can you get the musicians in the studio? And can you get the background vocalists? All of them deserve a salary. It's their livelihood, not a salary, but their wage. So the idea is, if we're actually doing it right, where this is an actual industry and we're honoring those, not those of us who are just doing this because, Jesus give us a few words to say to people, but for those who are truly, this is their livelihood and bread and butter, and they really want to impact society and impact mindsets and give people hope again, to dream again, and to remember that, okay, yes, we see all of these things in Jamaica and we see all these things in our country, but there was a time. Let's dream again. If we're going to do this, I believe it's going to take a lot of organization and honoring our musicians financially. That's another part of it. Even if we're not honoring the musicians financially, making it easier to comment, because all of these other artists, they literally can just comment on everything and make it easier for the Christian voice to be heard on these matters.
I can see JoAnn just vibrating with compassion.
That's interesting, Leighanne. I've heard some things here that I think are interesting for us to consider, because you're talking about cooperation, coming together, intentionality, intentionally coming together to create these types of songs, this music to impact our society. I've been challenging churches. I'm a disciple of JoAnn, challenging people to write their own songs. And I think a few churches are doing that, but many still have not caught up with the dream yet. They're not seeing the vision. And so they're not doing that. But you have some interesting thoughts that I think that we ought to consider. Yes, JoAnn?
Yes, YeKengale is not, he was definitely seeing me vibrating, because I remembered my mission in Burkina Faso in West Africa, that I was working with church musicians to help them write songs for church that use their own language and their own music. And so we would go into the village, we would have workshops with them, and over a 5-day period, we would be writing and recording songs. And we would go back to base, edit them, and then burn CD and send it, and then playing them in the market, and they're teaching it to the other churches that speak their language too. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what we need to do.
Yeah. It sounds as though it takes a little bit of ingenuity. We don't have to be lost in the clouds or in despair like Leighanne sounds sometimes with the money involved.
No. Listen, it has always been a struggle. For those of us who forget, Bob also at one stage had to literally put a gun to Neville's head to get his music played on the radio. It's always going to be, and whether or not we become so drastic, it's going to always take persistence of the greatest kind.
Yeah. Okay.
But one thing, David, quickly before we close the space, that I really wanted to bring into this space, because Stephen's presentation was in fact solely on pop music, and the fact is that in opposed to that we have classical music. And when I say classical music, I always have to clarify, especially in a space, I'm not referring to European music. Every civilization has its classic music. If I can make a metaphor, pop music is like when everybody in a society builds their homes, whether it be a hut or a home or a mansion on the hill. But classical music is where people come together to build a national stadium. It's a much grander affair. It deals with collaboration on a higher level or on the highest levels, and dexterity on the highest levels, whether you're talking about Chinese orchestra or African orchestra. And the fact is that there is a classical tradition. I mean, from the very beginnings in Jamaican music, I mean, we had our musical aggregations, the Carlos Malcolms, the Byron Lee and the Dragonaires, the Sonny Bradshaws, who at the beginning started to, build a foundation for corporate music, and it's evolving. We've had our initial experimentations with orchestra. But again, the best antidote for a bad habit is to build a better one. And when we come together and we develop, this is one of the things that, Trinidad's musical development has, where, the collective, we still in Jamaica pretty much are in the Kombolo phase. the band with the one guy who is doing the solo, or this instrumental soloist, and that's the ego stage of development. But when you're talking about musical cooperation, you're talking about emphasizing a different set of techniques and values, and it gets broadcast and it gets interpreted also into a society that is at work at developing itself in its all various aspects. I just wanted to bring that in the space as also a mission that we have in our churches, in our schools, in the society in general, and it is to work on basically bringing musicians into collectives and to making it work. And I know that right now, even the solo artist working with a track in today's modern technology where you don't even have to go and get a bassy, Leighanne, or a thing. Even that itself poses a problem to many people. I understand. But hello, aluta continua.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever that speaking in tongues means. Anyway.
I know we're short on time. In fact, time's probably gone. But just one more thing I want to use, and that is that I think in this whole talk about Jamaican music, that we are leaving out a particular genre, and it is the revival genre. In fact, it was only recently that it was recognized as a genre internationally, I think. And I have seen the way large portions of our population respond to revival music.
Yeah.
But that is a whole nother conversation.
And Nyabingi, by the way.
Pardon?
Nyabingi also.
And Nyabingi. But I did a kind of survey. Yes, it wasn't as complete as it should have been. And revival came out
on top.
Yeah, but revival crossing over into dancehall, Kokodoo, for instance, that is, I'm told by some of my friends who go to many dancehall sessions that the dancehall session must begin with Kokodoo. You know what I mean?
And that is why I said it is a whole other conversation, but it is an important and necessary conversation. So next time.
Yes, most definitely. Anyway, we need to start coming to an end quickly. I want to give people in the audience an opportunity to ask questions.
The way to influence culture right now is content. It's not even bringing in people into a building anymore. It's content. Yes. People will spend hours scrolling through TikTok, through Instagram. They want to scroll. Mm-hmm. The people who are influencing culture right now are the people who are willing to pay for the high quality cameras and pay for the ring lights and the this and the that. If we are aware of this, church is pivoting to focusing heavily on content creation to get the people in. We're not saying neglect house worship. Absolutely important. Assembling together, etc. Extremely important. But even live feeds, how our live feeds look, how our lighting, there's so many things that as a church, unfortunately, if we really want to fish in the 21st century, in 2023, if you really want to be fishers of men, and you want to become all things to all men, people respond to content. And unfortunately, content creation, in many ways, if it's going to be high quality and all of that, it's very expensive. Churches up here, in many cases, have a whole team on staff. A team on staff that creates the slides, they have a promo video before the sermon, and then a follow-up video after the sermon. Just a 3-second, 30-second flash. Every sermon has a theme. They have a song they put to it. All of this is so intentionally done. And it's because of the reality check that society, people have changed, young people have changed, and the digital space in many ways has taken over. And so the idea of coming together as a church in our country and really just pooling resources into getting where the teens are, to getting where the young people are, to getting where everybody is at this point in time. Online, TikTok. How many churches have a TikTok account?
Right.
How many churches have an Instagram account? And if they even do, how many of them are actually posting reels? that are really saying, hey, we're not for the guns, of course, cooler than that, but you know what I mean? Or we're for marriage God's way, or whatever else, with a cool, relatable way that these people can, it's something we'll have to start pumping money into, or else we'll continue to lose our people and lose that influence.
Leighanne, when people hear pumping money, they get nervous. I'm going to suggest that we change that message a little. We need to start pumping thought into it. And then we realize that the resources need to come. I notice a comment from a Caribbean theologian, Richard Beckford, highly respectable Caribbean thinker. He says the messaging of the music in our Caribbean spaces of Christian worship by large represents a theology that is not culturally sensitive and is rather presenting an abstract God. God isn't present, okay? This diverse space is in need of revolution. And Henry Morgan, the most devastating thing to reggae is separation of the beat and the rhythm from the lyrics. The reputation of the message musically is sadly. Okay. May I ask you guys just to close off for me with a thought? You've already started. I want you to talk specifically now. Some thoughts have already started to come. Your closing statement. What can we as concerned Caribbean people, many of us Christians, what do we need to do right now to start to help our music to have a greater impact positively on our culture? JoAnn, started you.
Okay, well, what comes to my mind first and foremost is that we need to start openly and transparently discussing the issues in the context of the church and scripture. So discuss those issues so that it can be infused into the minds of the content creators, because content creators need something to base their creation on. So if the leaders, this would be you, David, and other people like you, could somehow guide the minds, guide the thinking, that would be step one for me. I'm going to leave the rest for the other
others. Thank you so much. Ken, your thoughts?
I'm remembering the last time that we had a small breakthrough. I'm speaking it from as a church person. Out of the absence of meaningful creative conversation between pastors and their music ministers, musicians, worship leaders, etc. There came an era which the Catalyst crew and the like kind of went through the boundary, but there was, at that point in time, there was a war between pastor and musicians that, you know, basically where musicians accused pastors of controlling, quite rightly, actually. And a lot has changed since then. As I said, Catalyst crew had to be the rebel group to say that, hey, creativity needs to find a way of expression, not controlling it. I think pastors and their musicians and their musical ministers, again, need to enter into a conversation as to how in this present space, the world is changing, AI is taking over, technologies at there's a whole lot that is possible. When we are not on the cutting edge of creativity, we lose. And I think, again, I could say much, but it boils down to this. I believe, again, if pastors and musicians, church musicians, began another open conversation about how creativity can be of greater impact in their congregations, firstly, as well as a congregation ministering within a community, and thought began to be given there, I think that there's a whole lot of solutions that can come from that kind of engagement. And so that's one thing I recommend.
Thank you. Leighanne, you have anything else you want to say as a close off?
Yeah, sure. Just the idea of investing effort and time, etc., in building even the skills. If we're going to deliver on content, etc., we'll have to make sure that, you know, even the idea of many of the musicians I know today, it's their churches that sent them to some camp and sent them to some music thing or whatever, or sent them to learn how to edit videos or whatever. And because of that, they're able to pour back into the kingdom, highlighting that, but also highlighting the importance of emphasizing that we're on the same team. When Cartel sing about dumpling and butter and all of these different things, and we then respond with a song saying, we know about dumpling and butter too, and Jesus kept us, you know, or whatever. And of course, it doesn't sound like that, but the idea is speaking to, I really highly, like, I want to jump on the vagueness and the abstractness of our music in this time, because when I was in high school, Jamaican Christian music was very different. It was talking about how mommy gone, daddy never there, yard, mommy dip on her face a ball, everybody vexed, things are hard, help, God help, Father God help. It was, in many ways, we've had, even though it may not have always been dominant, we've had music that has been very relatable. People laugh, but me not turn back. And everything, temptation come, and these are the things that are happening to me, very direct and specific. If we can jump further into talking about the many ills of how our minorities are treated, and to call out our government in many ways that they have been corrupt, and to highlight it with scripture too, and to say this is not what we stand for, to talk about the different things in our society that are hurting us, that on a day-to-day basis people are experiencing. To change our content into those things is going to be a place where we get rid of this thing of it's us against them. We can really highlight, you know what, Cartel, I agree with you. Not with everything you said, but I agree, that's not okay. And when you go before the government and say, the judge, and say a badness it name, let me comment on that with a song that speaks to the reality of that. That should have never been your experience. And I feel your pain. We can communicate empathy, love, and a passion for the freedom of people and for the upliftment of people through our music. We'll have to get, because another thing is a lot of church people don't even, they will say, that's not gospel, that's not gospel. And we have to be careful too, where if it's not specifically talking about the third heavens, and if it doesn't sound a certain way with the strings and cymbals, we have to make sure that we also are having those conversations in our churches to be more open-minded as we decolonialize into things that sound, you know, that don't always sound like the Queen's music, which is another thing we're still dealing with in our country.
Yeah. I want to say thanks to you guys. Thanks so much. I must tell you, as a theologian myself, I learned about something when I was back in seminary, when YeKengale killed Philip some years ago, something called theology of hope, which many of my classmates never understood. I came to understand and appreciate it a whole lot better, where a vision of the future of the kingdom of God is what pulls us towards that. We, as a church, we try to create that future every single day in the things that we do and we promote. And can I hear that coming out in some of the last comments here, you know, that we as people who want to see the change, we have to be in the space where we are creating the change. We're taking deliberate steps to make it happen. If it means collaboration between pastors and musicians, talk about open communication, talk about the ills of society, how the gospel speaks to those ills and not just the afterlife. How can we create a better world? Even if it doesn't happen in the way we want, at least we try to contribute to it. You know, that's the kind of direction that we need to go in. And so I'm throwing out that challenge to us on the platform that we start to form these very deliberate communities in trying to address this issue. I close with this. Someone spoke to me just yesterday, called me to talk to me about the difficulties he was seeing in his own church, which will remain nameless, that was dealing with a young lady who lived in a situation of abuse, teenager living in a situation of abuse, and the church had nothing, no way of helping her. But this is a church that consistently preaches the message of the gospel that you need to be saved and come to Jesus. It has no message to speak to people like her or to people in her community. And he was asking me how we could help to create greater awareness. One of the ways in which we can do that is through our music, you know, but it has to be deliberate. I want to thank you guys for your participation, for your comments, for your thoughts. I want to thank everybody who has come on. Please try to, what's the word? I've been off of Facebook for such a long time that I don't even remember now. Like the Facebook page of CCLN, Caribbean Christian Leadership Network. Find their Instagram page, go to whatever their social media link up is, you know, and be a part of that. And subscribe where?
YouTube channel.
To their YouTube channel. We want you to do that because CCLN, we do these discussion fora from time to time, and we want you to be a part of it. This is an attempt to get more Caribbean Christians coming together and speaking. And hopefully it's not just a talk shop, but out of it, we will have some action items moving forward to see how we can better. Again, we want to say thank you for being with us. Thank you, Reverend Jennings, for your historical, what's the word, overview on Jamaican music. Somebody wrote in the chat that you left out revival. It wasn't revival music, the person said. It's soon come back to it.
It was folk music.
Folk music. You left out folk music, they said, in our evangelists. But anyway, we know. And we just thank you. Thank you, Leighanne, all the way from New York. It's good to be able to fly you in, you know. Ken, thanks so much for your exposure and your experience and down in Trenchtown and with the music school that you talk about and your many years. We know it all came from Woolmer's, where you got your good foundation, you know. Thanks to JoAnn and all JoAnn and your ethnodoxology. I know JoAnn has been pushing for a little while now for us to become more conscious about using our local art forms in the act of worship. And for everybody else who has been a part of this discussion, wherever you are, peace and love. And use music and use our culture for the betterment of everybody. Thanks again.